What's up guys, welcome back to our channel. I am Laura and I am currently 19 weeks pregnant with a baby girl. This is my fourth pregnancy. We lost our first girl and we have two boys that are ages 2 and 1. And I have always gotten super sick with each of my pregnancies. And so today I wanted to share some tips and tricks of things that I've learned just with my experience throughout all of my pregnancies and dealing with morning sickness. So I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, I'm just sharing what has worked for me or things that I've learned in my opinion on things. So just to give a little bit of background on what morning sickness was like for me with my pregnancies, with my first pregnancy I was very sick. I was throwing up constantly every day. I was really sick until about 18 or 19 weeks in the pregnancy. I was just throwing up. And then with my boys, I would also get really sick and I would throw up a lot, but I would stop throwing up around 16 to 18 weeks. Now it would get better after the first trimester, but then the nausea would just kind of linger. And this pregnancy has been the hardest and the most severe by far. So I am currently 19 weeks right now and I am still throwing up. It is not nearly as bad as the first trimester, thank goodness. But the first trimester was just really bad. I actually ended up having to get IV therapy just because I couldn't keep anything down. I was getting very dehydrated and I would also start to feel lightheaded and my blood pressure was low and I would have headaches, and then a couple times I almost passed out. So I knew that was not normal, and so I asked for help, and so I got IV therapy from weeks 8 to 13, and I would go 2 to 3 times a week, and that was just something that really helped me just try to catch up with getting fluids and not be so dehydrated. And it really is amazing of how much better you feel when you get fluids if you're dehydrated, and so that was something that I really needed. Now morning sickness varies with each person. I know it's different with each person, and with each pregnancy it can vary from just feeling kind of queasy and just kind of sick like throughout the whole day and not throwing up, or it could lead to also, throwing up a couple times, or it could be kind of severe where you're throwing up several times a day, or just somewhere in between all of that. And so these tips that I'm going to share, I'm going to start with sharing some that should help anyone, even if you just have kind of mild morning sickness symptoms, to then work up to the more severe ones. Now my first tip is small frequent meals and constant snacking, especially on like nuts and protein. Now morning sickness is hard because if you get hungry, you get nauseous. And then also if you eat too much, like if you're full, then it's harder to keep the food down. And so it's just kind of like this balance that you're trying to juggle all day of eating some food so that you have something in your stomach, and then not eating too much so you don't throw up, but then eating frequently enough so that you don't get hungry. And so it's something that's very difficult for you to juggle. And so that's why a lot of people recommend small frequent meals and constant snacking. But the hard thing for me was, especially when I was in the very thick of morning sickness, nothing sounded good to me. I didn't want to eat anything because nothing sounded good. So what I would have to do was just do like a mental inventory in my brain and just think of all foods, any foods. And if there was something that sounded good to me or that I felt like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I could eat that. Then I would try to stock up on that and make sure that my house was filled with things so that I had several options of different foods that I could eat when I was hungry. And so just an example of some things that generally worked for me would be things like applesauce, popsicles, some certain granola bars, frozen acai bowls, etc. And so if these were things that I felt like I could eat, I would just make sure that I had plenty of those in my home just so that I could eat those things. And protein is also really good because it keeps you full longer, and it also helps so that your blood sugars doesn't spike as much. And so something that I found that really helped was almonds. But for me, I had to have just plain almonds. They had to be unroasted and unsalted, just the plain almonds. And these were something that I found were really helpful to have with me, like in my bag or my purse if I was out. just because if I started to get kind of hungry, I would just snack on a few of them, and I found that that really helped me from getting super nauseous. Now, another tip or thing that you can try to help ease the morning sickness and the nausea are the acupuncture wristbands. I never felt like these fully got rid of the nausea for me, but I feel like they did help, and they did help kind of take the edge off of the nausea. And so if you don't have it as severe, this could be something that really helps you, and you can just find them on Amazon. Even if you have it really severe, this is just something that could help. Now, when I am pregnant, I start to become more sensitive to water. And water starts to have like a weird taste, or I start to become really particular about my water. And so if this is the case for you, the important thing is to figure out how you will still drink water, because it is still really important to drink water. For my first pregnancy, when we lived in an apartment, I absolutely hated the water that we had there. For some reason, it just tasted really weird to me. And so what we ended up having to do for my first pregnancy is just buy bottled water, and I would just put them in the fridge because I had to have my water cold. And so that was just how I would drink my water. I would just have cold bottled water. And then for my boys, I would also do that, but then I also found that adding things like flavor into my water also helped me drink water that wasn't bottled. And so I would add things like lemon or some berries to the water just to give it a little bit of flavor. Or I even found these little water flavor add-ins where you just squeeze some of this little juice into your water and then you mix it and you drink it up, and it adds a little bit of flavor. And no matter how I drink my water, I just always prefer to have it cold. So just find what works for you, because drinking water is still really, really important, especially in pregnancy. Now, mints have been my saving grace. I always keep some mints with me if I go out. And these are just some great things to have. They're great if I'm starting to feel nauseous, I take some. If I'm smelling something that grosses me out, having a mint in my mouth kind of helps kind of mask the smell, and it helps me kind of cope with that. And mints also help after I've thrown up and I feel like my mouth is just really nasty. So mints all around, I feel like they've just been really, really helpful. I always make sure that I have them with me. And so you can try mints, you can try mint gum, or if you don't like mint flavor, you could always try a hard candy or something and see if that works for you. Now, your sense of smell is heightened when you are pregnant, and sometimes that means that some smells become very overpowering and they make you nauseous. And so for all of my pregnancies, I just could not stand the smell of cooking chicken or meat. That was just something that always made me so nauseous. And then with this pregnancy, something that really got me was just anytime I changed any of my boys' dirty diapers. And so that was hard because those are things that I can't really avoid because I have to change my boys' diapers. I have to take care of them. And then my family still needs dinner, so I still have to make food for them. So a tip that I learned this pregnancy would be to wear a mask while doing those things, because the mask kind of helps block the smell, and it's even more effective if I have a mint in my mouth. And so that was something that I found that really helped me to still do the tasks that I needed to do and avoid the nasty smells. And then even sometimes you just can't avoid all the smells. So something that I would recommend is having something that you find really good, a scent that you like that doesn't make you nauseous, and just have that somewhere on your body or somewhere close by that you can smell. So if I'm out and about and then I smell something weird, I would like to have perfume or essential oil on my wrist or on my chest. So then I could just smell the inside of my wrist or smell the inside of my shirt, and then I could kind of have that good smell that would hopefully kind of block out the bad smell that was making me nauseous. Now, this next tip might sound kind of weird, but sometimes it is better to just throw up. This is something that I've learned by reading my body, and I've just figured out this is what works best for me. But for me personally, I find that if I'm starting to feel sick and if I just push it off, I will just keep feeling sick and I'll start to feel worse and worse. Then eventually I'll end up throwing up anyways. So something that I found out is if I just start to feel sick and I feel like, oh, I think I might throw up, I just go ahead and go throw up, because I know it'll just get worse and worse. And when I throw up, I do sometimes find a little bit of that relief and I do feel better. And I've also found that if I'm feeling sick and then if I'm craving something or if I'm hungry, and then if I don't throw up before I eat, I end up throwing up anyways after I eat. It's kind of hard, so it's like if you're feeling sick but you're going to eat something, try to throw up first and then eat that thing, and then it'll increase your chances of keeping that thing that you're craving, that thing that you want to eat, it'll increase your chances of keeping that down. So then if you feel like you want to throw up, one of the tips that I have to make throwing up easier is to actually drink a lot of water, especially like drink water before you throw up, just because it kind of helps things come out quicker and easier. And I know it sounds kind of weird that I'm saying like, oh, this is your tip to throw up, but for me that is something that I found that made throwing up not as awful. I would just chug a lot of water and then I would go throw up, and then I feel a little bit of relief, so then I can go back to just sipping some water, and then after my stomach has settled I would eat something. Now if you are throwing up a lot, I think it is important to realize that there are some foods that you should just avoid, not because they're bad for you in pregnancy, but just because they are awful to throw up. And so just with my experience, the things that I just feel like are awful to throw up are milk, raw lettuce, and super greasy foods. And so I've just had a bad experience anytime I would throw these up, and these things would make me feel even more sick and even more nauseous after I threw them up. So if you are throwing up a lot, I recommend just avoiding these foods and also avoiding any other foods that you hate throwing up, which I know is kind of weird because I'm sure everyone hates throwing up anything, but there are just some other foods that make you feel even more awful or that are just even more terrible to throw up. And so just recognize those things and then just try avoiding them for a while if you're still just throwing up constantly. Now, if you are throwing up a lot, it is important to try to get as many electrolytes and nutrients in your body whenever you can, when you're feeling up to it. And some things that I have found that have helped me have some electrolytes would be to have some Pedialyte popsicles, because they're filled with lots of electrolytes and usually I can stomach popsicles pretty good. Or Gatorade. I didn't like drinking Gatorade, so I would just put some Gatorade in a bowl and freeze it, and then I would eat it and it would be kind of like a slushie. I did that a lot with my first pregnancy, so now I can't really do that just because I associate the taste of Gatorade with being sick. But just find something that works for you, because that was really helpful for me for my first pregnancy. Just recognize your body, just kind of look at the signs and see if you get more sick at night, then maybe try to eat something during the day that's really nutrient dense. So some things that I would start to do when I noticed that I was able to start keeping breakfast down even for a little bit longer, I would try to focus on having some smoothies with lots of nutrients, where I would put berries, spinach, banana, avocado, chia seeds. I would just try to put as many nutrients in there as possible, and then I would just slowly sip on it throughout the day and just try to keep it down as long as possible. Because even if you're throwing everything up that you're eating, if you're not able to keep anything down, your body is still getting some of the nutrients from the food that you're eating. So don't worry too much about that. Your body is getting nutrients, your baby is getting the nutrients. And so it's just really important to just try to get as much as you can. And honestly, it's just survival mode. It really is. Just do the best that you can and just know that this also will pass. Another tip that I have is to take your prenatal vitamin at night right before you go to bed. Since I would always be really sick and I was always throwing up, I wanted to make sure that my prenatal vitamin was something that I for sure kept down. So for the longest time, and still now, I just take it right before bed, right before I go to sleep. That way I won't throw it up. That is something that has worked really well for me. I know some people that have had to change prenatal vitamins just because the one that they tried, they just couldn't keep it down, or it made them even more sick. If that's the case, if you're not having any luck with keeping your prenatal vitamin down, then I recommend trying a different one and seeing if that helps. And then if you're still not able to keep it down, talk to your OB and I'm sure they'll be able to help you and come up with solutions. Now, another tip that I have is to not be afraid to ask for help. I took medication with all of my pregnancies. I would tell my OB that I was just feeling really sick. I was okay with trying medications. I felt comfortable with taking that. And I even asked for help with this pregnancy because I knew that this was different, that this was even more severe for me. And so I asked for help and got IV therapy, and I feel like that has really helped. And the first trimester is just really hard because not everyone knows that you're pregnant. But for some, it could be the most difficult part of pregnancy. And so for me personally, I felt okay with telling those people around me, with telling family, with telling some close friends, even though it was still really early in the pregnancy, just because I knew that I required some help. because I would just get really, really sick. And so they have been a support system and they've been so helpful. There have been a few times where we would have to ask family or some friends for help just because I was so sick. And it's okay to ask for help because it's something important that you're doing. You're growing a baby and it's something that's normal, but it is something that can be very, very difficult. Now, I know morning sickness can be really, really hard. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh, well, I've tried everything. I tried everyone's tips, nothing is working. Like, I am barely holding on. Like, I'm just trying to survive each day. And just know that I've been there. I understand. It is so hard. And so these tips, they didn't work for me all the time. They're not like 100% foolproof. I wish there was just some kind of magic secret that would just magically make the nausea go away, but I don't have that secret. I'm sorry. But hopefully these tips will help. And I recommend just try new things. Just keep trying those things because maybe if they're not working now, they'll help you next week or in 2 weeks. And just know that it does get better. Something that I would tell myself to kind of have positive thinking would just be like, well, that means that my body is doing what it is supposed to. You know, that my HCG levels are rising, and so that's normal for pregnancy, and so this is a good sign. But that doesn't really make it any less hard, but I think it's also important to remember why you're going through this and just know that it will all be worth it in the end. So those are all the tips that I have that I'm going to share with you guys to deal with morning sickness and the nausea and vomiting. If you have any tips that I haven't mentioned, or if you know something else that would help, please leave a comment down below. I'm sure it would help lots of other people as well. And just know that you've got this. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.